Everyone wants to be great, but no one wants to be seen starting. We admire masters, envy their skills, and crave their confidence, yet forget that every one of them began exactly where most people give up: the beginning. It's messy, it's uncertain, it's full of self-doubt and slow progress. But buried in that uncomfortable starting point is the very path to mastery. This isn't a story about talent. It's a reminder that greatness is built, not born. Every expert you admire, whether a world-class athlete, a best-selling author, a skilled musician, or a successful entrepreneur, did not start out as a master. They began exactly where everyone does: uncertain, unpolished, and unproven. The myth that greatness is born, not built, is one of the biggest lies that holds people back. The truth is, no one starts at the top. Behind every seamless performance and celebrated achievement is a long, often invisible road of small beginnings, silent failures, and tireless work. It's easy to look at someone's highlight reel and assume they've always been exceptional, but mastery is rarely a straight path. It's forged in moments of doubt, long hours of practice, and a willingness to look foolish. The violinist once scratched out squeaky notes. The best-selling author once stared at a blank page, overwhelmed by self-doubt. The entrepreneur once launched ideas that flopped and failed. What separates the master from the rest isn't natural genius. It's a decision to start, to stay, and to show up again and again. In fact, the early stages of any journey are often the most uncomfortable, because that's when the gap between vision and ability is the widest. You know what you want to achieve, but your skills haven't caught up yet. This phase can be frustrating and even painful, but it's necessary. It's where the real groundwork is laid. The muscles are built. The lessons are learned. And this stage is what most people skip or quit, convinced that if they were truly meant to do something, it wouldn't feel this hard. But the reality is, being bad at something in the beginning is not a sign of failure. It's evidence that you are learning. It's the most honest part of any growth process. Skills are developed through repetition, feedback, and endurance. Even natural talent can only take someone so far. Without commitment, even the most gifted individuals plateau. Meanwhile, those who continue to practice with intention and humility eventually surpass the ones who relied on raw ability alone. This is why it's so important to stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle or end. The master you're looking up to now once stood exactly where you are, looking up to someone else, wondering if they could ever get there. Everyone starts somewhere. The decision to begin, to endure the awkwardness, the missteps, and the failures, that's what sets the master apart. Not magic, not luck, just persistence, just time. And in that truth, there is immense encouragement. If every master was once a beginner, then every beginner holds the potential to become a master. Beginners fail, and they fail often. But this isn't a flaw in the process. It is the process. Failure is not a roadblock. It's part of the path to mastery. In fact, every meaningful breakthrough is preceded by trial and error, frustration, and moments that feel like defeat. It's through these early missteps that the deepest lessons are learned. Each mistake exposes a weakness, highlights a gap, and offers an opportunity to improve. Without failure, growth would be superficial at best. The problem is that many people interpret early failure as a sign to quit. They assume that struggle means they're not cut out for it, or that they lack talent. But what they don't see is that the people who succeed, those who seem flawless and confident, have failed more times than most beginners have even tried. The only difference is that they didn't stop when things got hard. They didn't walk away when their efforts didn't yield immediate results. Instead, they leaned into the difficulty, learned from it, and used it to fuel their progress. This mindset, seeing failure as feedback rather than final judgment, is what allows a beginner to eventually become a master. It reframes setbacks as part of a learning curve rather than a verdict on one's potential. Failure teaches resilience, adaptability, and critical thinking. It develops the mental toughness needed to keep going when results are slow or invisible. These are not just side effects of the journey. They are essential components of success itself. When you look at highly skilled people, you're often seeing the polished version of years of effort. You see the end result, not the messy middle. What's hidden behind their competence is a long string of failed attempts, abandoned drafts, flawed strategies, and embarrassing first tries. Mastery is essentially built on a foundation of failures that were used as stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks. Beginners have a unique advantage in this regard. They're allowed to fail. Expectations are low, and exploration is encouraged. It's the ideal time to experiment, take risks, and learn without the pressure of perfection. Yet many people fear failure, so much they try to avoid it altogether, sticking only to what feels safe or familiar. Ironically, this is what stalls progress. Avoiding failure often means avoiding growth. It's not talent that gets you through the tough parts. It's tolerance. Tolerance for discomfort, rejection, and not being good at something right away. Every time you fail, you build that tolerance. And with it comes wisdom. You begin to understand what works and what doesn't. You sharpen your instincts. You develop habits and mental models that guide you forward. That's not failure defeating you. That's failure shaping you. So the goal is not to avoid failure, but to embrace it intelligently, to reflect on it, adjust, and try again. Each setback contains the seeds of progress, but only if you're willing to stay in the game long enough to see it through. Doubt is one of the most persistent companions on the journey from beginner to master. It shows up quietly at first, a whisper that questions your ability, your worth, your place. As you take your first steps, that whisper often grows louder. You wonder if you're good enough, if you belong, or if you're just pretending. This is imposter syndrome, and it's far more common than most people realize. Even those who have achieved remarkable things still face it. What surprises many is that the more you care about your craft, the more likely you are to feel like a fraud. This experience isn't exclusive to beginners, but it's especially intense at the start. When you're surrounded by people who are more advanced, more confident, or more recognized, it's easy to feel like you're out of your depth. You compare your raw, unfiltered effort to someone else's polished output. You assume their confidence is real, and your doubt is proof you don't belong. But in truth, most people, no matter how far along they are, carry some level of uncertainty within them. They just get better at managing it. Imposter syndrome feeds off silence. When you don't hear others talk about their fears, you think you're the only one who feels them. But if more people spoke honestly about their struggles, you'd realize how normal those feelings really are. Writers doubt their words. Leaders doubt their decisions. Creators doubt their impact. The presence of doubt isn't a red flag. It's often a signal that you're stretching yourself, pushing boundaries, stepping into unfamiliar territory. What matters isn't whether you feel like an imposter, but how you respond to those feelings. Some let doubt paralyze them. They hold back from sharing their work, avoid challenges, or wait until they feel ready, a moment that rarely arrives. Others recognize that doubt is just noise. It's not the truth, it's a fear. And fears, while loud, don't have to be obeyed. Moving forward in the presence of doubt is one of the greatest acts of courage a beginner can demonstrate. There's a paradox here. The people most plagued by imposter syndrome are often the ones who are actually trying to do things right. They care about doing good work. They're reflective, self-aware, and conscientious. Ironically, these qualities are often signs of someone who is not an imposter at all. The real imposters are rarely the ones questioning themselves. They're too busy pretending to have all the answers. It's also important to remember that confidence doesn't precede action. It follows it. The more you show up, the more you do the work, the more evidence you gather that you're capable. Confidence is built through repetition and resilience, not from waiting to feel certain. Every time you act in spite of doubt, you shrink its power. And over time, what once felt like imposter syndrome becomes just another voice you've learned to live with, not a voice that dictates your path. Perfection is seductive. It whispers that you should wait until everything is just right, until the timing is ideal, the skills are sharpened, and the conditions are safe. But mastery doesn't emerge from perfect conditions. It's born from consistency. The person who shows up daily, who practices with intention, who embraces the boring repetition. This is the person who makes real progress. While perfection seeks approval, consistency builds results. One of the biggest traps of beginners is a belief that every effort must be flawless. This mindset creates pressure that paralyzes action. It leads to procrastination, disguised as preparation. People rewrite the same sentence, relaunch the same project, redo the same task, waiting for it to meet some internal standard of excellence. But the truth is, doing something imperfectly is infinitely more powerful than doing nothing perfectly. Momentum matters more than mastery in the early stages. Consistency doesn't mean massive output every day. It means showing up in whatever way you can. Some days, your work will be strong. Other days, it might feel weak, but every session compounds. Skill is built like a muscle through repetition and recovery. If you only work when you're inspired or things are going well, progress will be scattered and slow. But if you build a rhythm, even in small doses, that rhythm creates real transformation over time. There's a hidden benefit to consistency. It builds identity. When you consistently act in alignment with your goals, you start to see yourself differently. You're no longer just someone trying to write, code, create, or lead. You're someone who does it. That shift in self-perception is powerful. It turns effort into identity, and identity drives behavior. The more you show up, the more natural it becomes to keep showing up. Perfection, on the other hand, constantly resets the bar. No matter how well you perform, it tells you it's not good enough. It thrives on comparison, on critique, and on fear. Consistency silences that voice by normalizing effort. It says, this may not be great, but it's better than yesterday, and tomorrow, it'll be better than today. That mindset leads to mastery because it encourages learning, iteration, and forward motion, rather than stalling in place. In almost every field, the most successful people are not the most naturally gifted. They are the most consistent. They're the ones who didn't quit when their early attempts were messy. They're refined, adjusted, learned, and repeated. Over time, their body of work speaks louder than any one perfect piece. While others waited for ideal moments, they created a mountain of experience through daily, imperfect practice. Mastery is a result of accumulated effort. It's not one bold leap. It's thousands of small, quiet steps. That's why consistency beats perfection. Because consistency builds mastery through momentum, while perfection often kills it through hesitation. Being a beginner is often viewed as a weakness, a temporary stage to rush through, a space marked by clumsiness, mistakes, and insecurity. But there is real power in the beginning. It's a phase of curiosity, exploration, and unfiltered passion. At the start, everything is new. There are no rigid rules, no fixed habits, and no pressure to defend a reputation. This freedom allows you to take risks others won't. It lets you approach problems with a fresh perspective, unbound by how things are supposed to be done. In the beginning, mistakes are expected. You're not judged for failing. You're encouraged to try. There's space to experiment, to be creative without fear of losing credibility. That freedom rarely exists at higher levels, where visibility and expectations can create hesitation. Masters often envy beginners for their openness, their willingness to be wrong, to ask questions, to learn without ego. There's a purity in the process that often gets lost later on. Beginners also have the advantage of being deeply connected to their why. They start not for applause or rewards, but because something inside them feels pulled to begin. That internal motivation is powerful. It creates a sense of purpose that fuels effort, even when results are slow. Over time, people can lose sight of that purpose, becoming caught up in metrics, validation, or external expectations. But beginners, at least in the early stages, are driven by something real. That authenticity is a strength, not a shortcoming. Another often overlooked value of being a beginner is a steep learning curve. In no other phase do you grow as rapidly. Each attempt teaches you something. Each obstacle builds resilience. Every win, no matter how small, feels earned. The feedback is immediate. The progress is tangible. And while it may feel frustrating at times, that intensity of learning is a rare and powerful gift. You gain not only skill but also insight into yourself, your work ethic, your mindset. Being at the beginning also puts you in a state of humility. You know there's a lot to learn, and that keeps you open. You listen more. You absorb more. You're teachable. That mindset is critical, not just for starting, but for sustaining growth. Many people stop improving because they stop learning. They assume they've arrived. But those who continue to evolve carry the mindset of beginner even as they gain mastery. It's called a beginner's mind, and it's one of the most valuable perspectives to maintain. So while the beginning can feel awkward and uncomfortable, it's also one of the richest stages of the journey. It shapes your foundation. It reveals your drive. It teaches you how to endure, how to adapt, and how to believe in your own potential before there's proof. The beginning holds a raw material of greatness, and how you treat it determines what you'll ultimately become. Mastery isn't a destination reserved for the chosen few. It's a journey available to anyone willing to begin and keep going. Every expert you admire once stood where you are now, uncertain, inexperienced, and full of doubt. What set them apart wasn't perfection or talent. It was persistence. They embraced the awkward starts, learned from failure, and kept showing up. So wherever you are on your path, remember this. Being a beginner isn't something to hide. It's something to honor. Because every master was once a beginner who refused to quit.